This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by ExtraHop. Intrusion is inevitable, breaches don't have to be. ExtraHop is on a mission to help security teams take back the cyber advantage. Visit ExtraHop at RSA Conference to learn how AI-based network intelligence stops advanced threats already inside your cloud, hybrid, and distributed environments. Stop by booth S1327 or visit extrahop.com/cyberwire. That's extrahop.com/cyberwire to learn more. Ukraine offers an update on the cyber phases of Russia's hybrid war. Atlassian patches a Confluence critical vulnerability. CISA releases ICS advisory on voting systems. A state-aligned phishing campaign tried to exploit Follina. Is electronic warfare a blunt instrument in the ether? Verizon's Chris Novak stops by with thoughts on making the most of your trip to the RSA conference. Our guest is Tom Garrison from Intel with a look at hardware security. And a Russia-aligned group says they're not just hacktivists, they're cyber Spetsnaz. From the RSA conference in San Francisco, the city by the other bay, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, June 6, 2022. Ukraine sees itself as waging a defensive cyber war, leaving offensive operations to the Russian enemy and to, perhaps, various friendly governments from the West. In a briefing today, Victor Zhorov, deputy head of State Special Communications Service of Ukraine, characterized Russian cyber operations during the war as unremitting, but largely unsuccessful at crippling Ukrainian infrastructure. He also noted the high level of Russian disinformation operations, which extend not only to pushing specific lines of propaganda, but also to denying Ukrainians the means to gain reliable information and communicate with one another. The CyberWire asked Mr. Zhorov why Russian cyber attacks against Ukrainian infrastructure haven't been a significant factor so far. Had Russia not attempted them, or had Ukraine succeeded in stopping them? He answered that a kinetic attack is simply a more effective method of attack, and that's where the Russians had concentrated their efforts. He said Ukraine has successfully fended off cyber attacks against infrastructure, and that it was very aware of the cyber risk to its power grid. Ukraine has prevented, by swift action, an operation that would have deprived people of access to power. Mr. Zhorov expects such Russian attempts to continue, and he's confident of Ukraine's ability to defend its power grid in particular. But he emphasized that Russia has focused on kinetic attack and that cyber operations, especially information operations, are being used by Moscow as a supporting adjunct to traditional military operations. We were also able to ask about the operations in support of Ukraine U.S. Cyber Command alluded to last week. The operations General Nakasone mentioned last week to Sky News were, according to Mr. Zhorov, U.S. operations, and Ukraine didn't participate in them, and so Ukraine is not in a position to comment on them. Mr. Zhorov said he can add nothing to General Nakasone's statement. He did say that Ukraine did not conduct offensive cyber operations. It does, however, conduct defensive cyber operations, and he said that cooperation with NATO was extensive and ongoing. Ukraine's lack of dedicated cyber units, by which he presumably meant organizations trained, equipped, and authorized to conduct offensive operations, and its reservations about the permissibility of such operations under international law are the principal reasons for Kyiv's restraint in this regard. We followed up with a question about hacktivism. If Ukraine doesn't conduct offensive cyber operations, what about hacktivist attacks on Russian assets? Are these conducted independently with Ukrainian guidance, direction, or control? Mr. Zhorov replied that the hacktivists were acting independently and were not under Ukrainian control. He also noted that hacktivism has so far not been very significant in its effects. Much hacktivism has gone into defacement of Russian websites. Reuters reported Saturday, for example, that the site belonging to Russia's Ministry of Construction, Housing and Utilities had been defaced with the slogan "Glory to Ukraine." This particular ministry of negligible strategic significance was clearly a target of opportunity, hacked because it was hackable. But the question suggested to him that the possibility of developing an offensive capability as a deterrent was worth serious discussion with partners and allies. He noted the difficulty under international norms of conducting offensive cyber operations, and he stressed that Ukraine aimed to behave responsibly, and that Ukraine wanted to bring Russia to a similar responsibility in cyberspace. He thinks that the ways in which nations defend themselves in cyberspace will certainly change after this war, and that Ukraine intended to be a full participant in that change. And he thought questions about responsible defense in cyberspace would be good ones to address to General Nakasone. The existence of cyber forces do indicate a country's potential to defend itself effectively, but it's not yet clear how such potential can be used to build deterrence. Thinking about deterrence in this way will be among the matters countries will take up at the end of the present war. As promised, Atlassian released a patch for Confluence vulnerabilities this past Friday. Atlassian's tools are widely used. The record estimates that more than 200,000 enterprises use the company's products. CISA, which had on Thursday required all the U.S. federal agencies whose security it oversees to immediately mitigate the risk of compromise via the vulnerability by disconnecting affected versions of Confluence from the Internet, on Friday updated its direction. Per BOD 22-01, Catalog of Known Exploited Vulnerabilities, federal agencies are required to immediately block all Internet traffic to and from Atlassian's Confluence server and data center products, and either apply the software update to all affected instances or remove the affected products by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, June 6, 2022. On Friday, CISA released an advisory on a voting system, specifically Dominion Voting System's ImageCast X. CISA recommends election officials continue to take and further enhance defensive measures to reduce the risk of exploitation of these vulnerabilities. The advisory includes 13 specific steps CISA urges election officials to follow should they plan to use the Dominion system. Proofpoint found targeted attacks that sought to exploit the Follina vulnerability. The company tweeted its discovery late Friday evening. They said, Proofpoint blocked a suspected state-aligned phishing campaign targeting less than 10 Proofpoint customers, European government and local U.S. government, attempting to exploit Follina, while Proofpoint suspects this campaign to be by a state-aligned actor based on both the extensive recon of the PowerShell and tight concentration of targeting. We do not currently attribute it to a numbered threat actor. Microsoft had released recommended mitigations on May 30th, and the following day, CISA urged users to apply those to their systems. We return briefly to the hybrid war in Ukraine. Russian electronic warfare capabilities, which before the invasion of Ukraine had been regarded as national strength, have indeed been employed with effect in Russia's war. They are, however, being used as a kind of artillery in the electromagnetic spectrum. The preferred technique has been jamming, as opposed to collection or deception, and that jamming has tended to be powerful and indiscriminate, pushing noise across wide swaths of the spectrum. The AP reports some use of electronic warfare for targeting, but the Russian main effort seems to be carried out by the jammers. Finally, there's a new self-proclaimed crew of cyber commandos in action, or at least a crew that says they're in action. Security Affairs reports that researchers at Resecurity have associated a threat group with Operation Panopticon, a nominally hacktivist campaign announced by a Russian group during the last week in May. That group styles itself the Cyber Spetsnaz and identifies with the Killnet Collective. Security Affairs explains, the actors are positioning themselves as an elite cyber offensive group targeting NATO infrastructure and performing cyber espionage to steal sensitive data. The report adds, on June 2nd, the group created a new division called Sparta. The responsibility of the new division includes cyber sabotage, disruption of internet resources, data theft, and financial intelligence focused on NATO, their members, and allies. Notably, Sparta outlines the activity as a key priority today and confirms the newly created division is an official part of the KillNet Collective group. Based on the description, the actors call themselves hacktivists. However, it's not yet clear if the group has any connection to state actors. Sources interviewed by Security Affairs interpreted this activity with high levels of confidence to be state-supported. Interestingly, the name Sparta, in context of the current Ukrainian war, is related to the name of a unit from the Donetsk People's Republic. Spetsnaz is a Russian term for a special operations unit. Historically, the name was used most often to refer to the GRU's special operations forces. Western equivalents of Cyber Spetsnaz would be names like Cyber Commandos, Cyber Green Berets, Cyber Rangers, Cyber SEALs, things along those lines. The name is grandiose. We shall see how far, if at all, the Cyber Spetsnaz lives up to its press releases. And now, a word from our sponsor, the Cybersecurity Inside podcast. How are NFTs impacting data? What is the benefit of a security champion? Why should we pay attention to AI emotion recognition? Tune in to the Cybersecurity Inside podcast to hear hosts Tom Garrison and Camille Morhardt talk with industry leaders about today's most important security and technology topics. In the What That Means with Camille episodes, Camille Morhardt asks top experts to explain terms like cybernetics and blockchain in ways we can all understand, and then dives deeper into the hottest topics and arguments they face. Whether you're a CISO, security expert, or just want to know more, the Cybersecurity Inside podcast will help you walk away smarter about cybersecurity and have fun while you're at it. Check out cybersecurityinside.com/cyberwire today to listen to the latest episode. That's cybersecurityinside.com/cyberwire. Or search for Cybersecurity Inside wherever you listen to podcasts. And we thank the Cybersecurity Inside podcast for sponsoring our show. Intel recently sponsored research by the Ponemon Institute titled Security Innovation: Secure Systems Start with Foundational Hardware. To dig into some of the findings, I checked in with Tom Garrison, Vice President and General Manager of Intel's cybersecurity team in the client organization.
People are spending a lot of money, and there's, research suggests that there's about $172 billion just this year that's going to be spent on cybersecurity and enhancing cybersecurity. So there's a tremendous amount of expenditures that's going on in the industry, which I think is fascinating. We dove also into, I mentioned hardware-based security, and what we found was that only about just a little over a third of the respondents said they had already adopted hardware-assisted security solutions, which isn't very high. I mean, as we all know, that within the security world, if you are relying on a software-only strategy, you aren't as safe as you could be with a hardware-based one. So with only a little over a third of respondents having already adopted, we know there's a lot more to go. But we are assured, or reassured, I should say, that about 47%, or about call it half of the respondents that responded are saying that they're going to do so within the next 6 to 12 months. So while only a third have done it up till now, half say that they have plans to do it within the next 6 to 12 months. So that's a good start.
Can we take a step back here and just provide some clarity on the definitions here? I mean, how do you and your colleagues at Intel define the difference between a software or a hardware approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that we think about hardware-assisted approaches is to think about software-based solutions that don't rely only, obviously, as we would say, in software. So they know how to use the hardware capabilities that are built into the platform. For example, the ability to look for return-oriented programming attacks, and to be able to use technologies that are built into the silicon, like control flow enforcement technologies. So it's a very technical way to talk about it, but these are features that are built into the platforms that can deliver on a very, very high degree of trust that you just can't get with software. And there's a whole host of those, but it's important to understand that as we think about like supply chain attacks and other types of attacks, the attackers are looking for any exploit they can. And the good news is, with a hardware-assisted and hardware-based security solutions, this is sort of the bedrock with which security attackers really can't get underneath. So that's the challenge with software, is that anybody trying to attack a software-based solution, if they're trying to attack the application, for example, once the application becomes more hardened and difficult of a target, they'll go underneath the application to, let's say, the operating system. Once the operating system gets really good and hard to attack, they'll go under the operating system to the VM. And likewise, attackers are constantly trying to get underneath the attack surface and all the protections that exist there. And so with hardware-based solutions, the good news is there's nothing below hardware. And so hardware can act as this bedrock with which then a security solution, both hardware and software-based, can be built upon with a high degree of trust.
So based on the information that you have gathered here, what's your advice? What should the security folks out there do?
Well, first and foremost is, I would say, ask yourself, do you know whether your machines are capable of the latest in security innovation? So basically, if your platforms are older than about 3 years old, you really should be considering refreshing those platforms. Newer platforms are considerably safer from a feature set standpoint. The second piece doesn't sound really all that sexy, if you will, but it is very important. And that is, do you have a process to keep your machines updated on a regular basis? And as simple as that sounds, a lot of companies don't have a process where every quarter or at least twice a year, they are taking all of the known vulnerabilities for that specific platform and making sure that the mitigations are loaded on that machine to keep it safe. And that is a big area that, again, doesn't sound that interesting, but it turns out to be one of the biggest single steps that you can have, having a process to keep those platforms updated.
That's Tom Garrison from Intel. And now, a word from our sponsor, Microsoft Federal. The Biden administration is taking steps to modernize security approaches across the federal government with a cybersecurity executive order. Microsoft Federal is your partner in meeting those mandates. They help federal agencies better understand the executive order milestones, build a strategic response that aligns to security modernization priorities and executive order requirements, and determine how technology partners can help accelerate the journey. Their unique approach is based on the decades of trust they've earned from partnering with federal agencies. Microsoft Federal empowers agencies with free tools, like a cloud adoption framework and zero-trust reference architecture. Together, we can move forward into a new era of cybersecurity and empower a secure, resilient federal workforce. Learn more at aka.ms/cyberEO. That's aka.ms/cyberEO. And we thank Microsoft Federal for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Chris Novak. He's Managing Director of Security Professional Services for Verizon Business. Chris, it's always great to welcome you back to the show. You know, as we head into this week of the RSA conference, I really wanted to check in with you. You're someone who's been around in this industry for a few years and have attended your share of RSA conferences here. What does this represent to you as sort of a marker point for our year and an event for the community?
I think it's first of all, it's always a pleasure to be here. And I think, when we look at RSA, it is, really the bellwether. It is what everybody kind of rallies around in the security community, whether you love conferences or not. There is a lot of great intellect and knowledge that comes together at those events. And obviously, you've also got to have a fair share of skepticism and paranoia, as I think most security professionals do, in knowing that there's probably some marketing silver bullets out there that aren't really silver bullets. But I think nonetheless, it's important to get a view on where innovators are going, where the disruptors are. You always typically have kind of a camp of relatively mainstream approaches to security, and then a camp that's looking to really say, how do I change things up? How do I make a name for myself? And I think, an event like RSA is a good place to kind of see how all that comes together and see, what the future might hold.
We've had a break for a couple years here with everyone hunkering down with COVID, but people are back in person this year. Is there an extra element that adds to be able to see folks face to face?
I think without a doubt, and this is one of the things that I've had a long held belief on, is that, people are naturally social creatures. We like to interact with one another. And, I think everybody has done a great job of trying to make things work during the course of the pandemic. And obviously, the opportunity to come face to face, I think we tend to build better and more resilient relationships when we've had the opportunity to meet face to face, grab a lunch, grab a drink, grab a dinner. You build a relationship differently that way than you might do virtually. So I think for a lot of organizations, that'll be a big opportunity for them. And I also think you're going to see a lot of organizations that will probably have a better success breaking new ground when they have an opportunity to demo their new widget or service or whatever it might be in front of an actual live audience where you can actually walk up, see it, and touch it.
For those folks who are new to the industry and maybe this is their first time at a conference of this scale, any tips or words of wisdom to have it not be so overwhelming?
So I would say, the best advice I would give someone is, one, take a look at the conference agenda before you go. If you've never been there before, it will be wildly overwhelming. The venue is huge. The amount of people, the lights, the flashy objects, it can be extraordinarily overwhelming. I mean, you literally get a map when you enter. So I would say take a look at the agenda in advance and try to map out what sessions you may want to go to. There are sessions that do actually fill up or sell out, and you might not get a seat if you haven't planned in advance or you haven't gotten there in advance. So I'd encourage folks to really figure out what are the things that are really the most important so you can make sure you can map your schedule out accordingly for that. And obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a little plug for my session on Tuesday morning. So hopefully folks can come check that out as well. But yeah, definitely check out the session agendas and figure out what works for your needs. And I think it's also a great opportunity to network with people as well. There's an opportunity to meet with, a lot of your vendors, a lot of your partners, and really, cover a lot of ground that maybe if you were to try to do that in person, especially in today's day and age with COVID, you might have had a much harder time traveling around and meeting all those people face to face, especially if a lot of people maybe are coming out that normally right now would be hybrid or work from home. They might not be entertaining in-person meetings otherwise. So this may be an opportunity for you to meet those folks face to face.
Yeah, I would add also, don't be shy. If you see somebody who you'd like to get to know, introduce yourself. I think most of us are happy to meet new people and happy to help folks who are new to the industry get a leg up. So don't hold back.
Absolutely agree. That is definitely good advice. And I often find that a lot of people will come up to the expo booths and, we see, folks from all different parts of their security career journey from, just breaking in to, longtime veterans. And the one thing I do find is most folks are very accepting, very supportive, and very much happy to have a conversation. I tell people you generally don't kind of end in or find yourself in cybersecurity if it's not a thing you're passionate about. And you probably find a lot of people are happy to share how they got to where they are or what they're doing or where they might find, interesting insights or creative opportunities for yourself.
All right. Well, Chris Novak, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Devo, whose cloud-native logging and security analytics platform is built to transform security operations for today and beyond. Visit devo.com to learn more. Thank you also to our friends at RSA Conference, where the world talks security. Through global events and year-round content, RSAC connects you to cybersecurity leaders and cutting-edge ideas for a safer, more secure future. Learn more at rsaconference.com/cyberwire22. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Rachel Gelfin, Liz Irvin, Elliot Peltzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Puru Prakash, Justin Sabi, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. And now, a word from our sponsor, CyberReason. They're out there, and they're coming for you. Ransomware attackers, sophisticated criminal armies bringing organizations to their knees and costing companies millions. But ransomware shouldn't feel inevitable. You should feel invincible. CyberReason is undefeated in the fight against ransomware with the only predictive ransomware protection available, automatically stopping attacks before encryption and empowering security teams with full visibility. It's the ultimate protection against ransomware, an AI-powered defense that defeats ransomware at every stage of the attack, stopping today's threats and ready for tomorrow's. True cyber defense designed for true defenders. Because ransomware won't define this era, those who defeat it will. Visit cyberreason.com to learn more. That's CYBEREASON.com. And we thank CyberReason for sponsoring our show.